Good morning from Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. On behalf of the Emerging Markets Institute and the Atkinson Center at Cornell, welcome to the webinar, Beyond the Green Agenda, Redefining Climate Leadership Through Global Humanism. The Emerging Markets Institute was founded 15 years ago with a vision to bring international perspectives into Cornell's MBA program and to make Cornell a thought leader in understanding emerging markets. I cannot think of a better way to launch the celebrations of the 15th anniversary than with these events that we are having this week here in Cornell in partnership with the Atkinson Center. Over these 15 years, EMI has grown tremendously. The Fellows Program includes now 117 students from the different MBA programs, and also we engage with undergrads in collaboration with different clubs, EMIC, the Lava Club, partnerships with Corning International, Mark Mobius, and more. We also launched an annual conference that will be November 7 at Cornell Tech in New York City, and you are all invited. And under the theme, New Rules and New Opportunities, will bring business leaders from emerging markets, alumni, students, and global partners. At the conference, we'll release the EMI's 10th annual report, co-authored with my colleague Anne Miru and myself, Lourdes Casanova, director of the Emerging Markets Institute, in collaboration with the OECD Development Center, International Financial Corporation, UNCTAD, and universities around the world. The report explores the evolving role of emerging market multinationals. And alongside the conference, we host the finals of the EMI Corning Case Competition and the EMI Mark Mobius Pitch Competition. And we will also celebrate the recipient of the 4th Cañizares Alumni Award. Then this could not be done with the support of alumni, students, and volunteers. So today we have with us Patrick Berry from the Atkinson Center, who is an accomplished leader in cross-border sector, in cross-sector partnerships and collaborations for impact. He joined the Atkinson Center in 2019 and serves as the Bruce Bailey Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships. Thank you, Patrick, for your partnership. But most importantly, we are joined by the inaugural Distinguished Fellow of the Emerging Markets Institute and the Fellow of the Atkinson Center, former President of Colombia, Mr. Iván Duque Márquez. Iván Duque served as the youngest President of Colombia from 2018 to 2022, elected as the candidate from the Democratic Center Party. While leaving the country, he showed thoughtful diplomatic strength, trying to solve the conflict in Colombia, and also opened the door to 1.7 million Venezuelan refugees to settle and gain citizenship status in Colombia. And also, he was the one addressing the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic in a very successful way. He's currently a Distinguished Fellow at the Woodrow Wilson Center, a Transformational Distinguished Fellow at Oxford University, a Distinguished Fellow at WRI, a Leadership Fellow at Florida International University, a Distinguished Fellow at the Bezos Earth Fund, and an Ambassador of the World Coalition for Nature, among many other things. Is the author of numerous books, I believe 13, including The Road to Zero and the 2023 book, Our Future, a Green Manifesto for Latin America and the Caribbean. And this book was the focus of a presentation last year here in Cornell. But he just published his last book that goes beyond that and says, Fuerza en Verdad, Strength and Truth. And Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of the UK, wrote the foreword. The book is a summary of conversations he has had at Oxford University, shaping the future of humanism, an urgent and luminous exploration of the destiny of our humanity in the middle of uncertainty, polarization, in this technological revolution. So Ivan Duque delves in the book into the intellectual heart of Oxford to hold memorable dialogues with all these influential thinkers. And the book will be the conversations that we are going to have today. So President Ivan Duque is joining us this week in the Cornell campus in Ithaca for a series of discussions with the deans, faculty, students. And yesterday he was the keynote at Claremont Hall. And today we have this conversation that is based in some of the themes that he presented yesterday. And now I pass the word to Patrick. Patrick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lourdes. I am thrilled to be here today. We're living in what experts call the decisive decade for climate action. At Cornell, we believe the scale of this challenge demands something extraordinary, what we call radical collaboration. As Lourdes said, I'm representing the Cornell Atkinson Center for Sustainability and the 2030 Project, where we unite over 700 faculty fellows from 12 colleges and 90 departments with one mission: ensuring people and planet don't just survive, but thrive. The center aims to serve as a catalyst, connecting Cornell's world-class researchers with partners like the Nature Conservancy, Environmental Defense Fund, leading companies, and government policymakers to turn breakthrough science into real-world impact. We're thrilled to be co-hosting President Duque this week. One of the best ways we can sharpen our research and amplify our impact is engaging seasoned leaders and decision makers, learning from those with real-world experience. This embodies Cornell's evolution as the land grant to the world, extending our founding mission of practical, accessible knowledge beyond our borders to tackle humanity's greatest challenges. Today's conversation with President Duque perfectly exemplifies this vision. And President Duque, I'd like to start with a question. Your 2023 book, Our Future, was described as a green manifesto for Latin America, emphasizing the roles that governments, the private sector, civil society, and even individuals can play in climate action and protecting biodiversity, specifically from the perspective of Latin America. Now you're exploring the future of humanism in your new book, Fuerza y Verdad, Strength and Truth. After your range of conversations with various experts and your own reflections, what is your current working definition of humanism today? And how do you see it as connected or useful for the twin crises of climate change and biodiversity loss?
Well, Patrick, thank you so much for your introduction. The same to Professor Lourdes Casanova. It is a great honor for me to be a fellow of the Atkinson Center and the Emerging Markets Institute in Cornell. And I want to begin by thanking both institutions. But I also want to start this reflection with something that I shared yesterday. There's a very knowledgeable modern philosopher in Spain who, starting a conversation, asked one simple question that we all should reflect: who are you? And in that reflection, we are most likely to respond, I'm a politician, I'm a professor, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an artist. But that's not the question. Many people would say, well, I'm Colombian, or they would say, I'm Argentinian, I'm Spanish. But that's not the question. That's your nationality. People would say, I am African American, I am Colombian, I am Latin American. But that has more to do with your racial origin. The question about who we are has to do with something that defines us in a unique way, in a humanistic way, which is, what are our values? What are our motivations? What is it that we do in favor of others? What are the traces that define our personality? And that is something which is deeply humane and exclusively humane. And as I have been saying, what worries me is not that with the rise of new technologies, machines want to look closer to humans. What worries me is that humans try to look closer to machines. because it is empathy, sensibility, the capacity of reflection, moral reflection, ethical reflection that makes us unique. So humanism is that particular element that makes our life exclusive from other beings, from other elements in society. And it has to do with the idea of reflecting on how we can improve the role of human beings in order to preserve our societies. That's the way I love to define it. And if you put this in the context of Nuestro Futuro, the Great Manifesto, in order for us to be more responsible, more conscious, more effective in the way we protect nature, we have to be more humane. And we have to understand that our existence depends on nature, that our survival depends on nature. So the protection of nature is also part of our ethical compass. It's part of our moral compass. And I think that's how both two concepts come together. And what we are trying to present in both books is first, why Latin America cannot wait until the big superpowers do something meaningful on the environment. We have to do it our own way. We have to react, and we have to understand that the assets that we have from nature makes us richer and stronger. And that's why we have to protect it. And if I associate this with the concept of humanism, the only way that we are going to be more aware on how should we act is by having our humanistic compass in the way we behave. So that's why, Patrick, I believe those two concepts come together.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this very broad answer that makes us think about what we are. I wanted now to move to leadership challenges. From your experience as president of a very important country, where you had to deal with COVID-19, the Venezuelan refugee crisis, and social and environmental challenges, how leaders must balance immediate social needs with long-term development? Should a country like Colombia focus on semiconductors when you have so many immediate needs in education, health, climate, and more? How do you balance the long term with the urgent needs of day to day?
So you need to work on both, Lourdes. And maybe it was Winston Churchill who said at some point that the difference between a politician and a statesman is that the politician is looking for the next election, while the statesman is looking for the next generation. So you have to have a profound and deep look into what kind of nation do you want to create in the long run. Leadership is about improving. It's about making things better. It's about having more positive impact. And that's also a debate that I have with students sometimes, because there are people who have been able to get power, acquire power, but they're not leaders because they did not perform something positive for society. So, for example, Hitler gained power, and he used power, and he mobilized with power, and his oratory was also part of his power. But was he truly a leader? No, because he was actually a person who wanted to destroy a racial group, a society, a way of thinking. He was trying to impose in his caudillo style his beliefs at a very violent cost for society. So leadership has to do with improving and getting things much better. And in the case of Colombia, the time when I was in office, I understood that I had to work on solving the immediate, but we had to establish a roadmap in order for Colombia to be a leader in entrepreneurship, in technology, in climate action, in energy transition. How Colombia would create the conditions to have more programmers, and those programmers to make Colombia a Silicon Valley equivalent in Latin America. So all those things are part on the way that you should lead. But the most important element, Lourdes, is the ethical guidelines that you establish and you define. I am a follower of the Stoics, and Marcus Aurelius, who was the philosopher emperor, he said something very basic. If it's not true, don't say it. And if it's not positive, don't do it. And I think those elements have to be very important in the way we make decisions in leadership, in particular in the Global South and in the case of Latin America. And that's why I feel proud that during our term, we were able to expand the social safety net in Colombia like no other time, that we left free public tuition in public universities for the poorest of the poor and the rising middle class, covering more than 90% of all the students in public universities, that we were able to pass from 12 to more than 30% protected areas, that we took the energy matrix in non-conventional renewables at 0.2% of the energy matrix and left it above 16, 17% and the road to being 20%. Those things were decisions we took that were important for the mid and long run, that we started early with a great KPI monitoring system, but we also focus on the immediate, related to security, related to the social protection for the most vulnerable population, but also associated with the fact that we need to have a sound macroeconomic system so that we can have a stronger, lasting, sustainable, scalable, and replicable society. So that's how we work, Lourdes.
Thank you for that, President Duque. And I'd like to pull a thread out that you floated in there around the different levels of leadership, not just at the federal government or head of state, but at a bunch of different levels. And in your work, you've emphasized not just biodiversity and nature, but what you coined in Nuestro Futuro as the broader concept of biodiversities and biodiverse citizens, the importance of understanding how people in cities are inherently connected to nature, and also the diverse roles, responsibilities, and opportunities that individuals, social groups, companies, and government, different levels of government, can play in addressing climate change and similar challenges. Can you elaborate a bit on this expanded framework and
Well,
how?
the first element, Patrick, is that in order to be successful in climate change actions, we have to understand that the world lives in cities in a majoritarily way. That by the end of this decade, almost 80% of the population in the planet is going to live in cities. So what happens in cities will determine whether you're doing things the right way or the wrong way when it comes to decarbonization, when it comes to carbon neutrality, or even when it comes to nature positive solutions. And we regularly don't think about this, but we can have the best policies, but if cities don't have a good waste management system, nothing will be done. If they don't have a sound public transportation policy, if they incentivize the usage of vehicles that are less pollutant, if we have a collective conscience on the usage of water and electricity. So that's why I say in Nuestro Futuro that biodiverse cities are essential because those are the places where the climate action is going to be concentrated. Now, we cannot delegate the full responsibility in the governments and the cities or the national governments. We have to understand that, yes, biodiverse cities are important and using the concept and applying it. But who lives in the cities? The biodiverse citizens, us. So we need to be knowledgeable enough on what is our daily carbon footprint. How long are we taking hot showers? What kind of food are we eating? Are we doing reuse, reduce, recycle at home? Are we driving short distances? Do we use carpooling or not? Do we use electricity all day long, even though we may have good sunlight in the place where we are and work? The products we consume, the amount of time that we use doing certain things that have a stress on energy and food and other things. So I believe that in order to have a holistic green manifesto, the biodiverse cities and the biodiverse citizens both are crucial in order to meet the national determined contributions for 2030 and beyond. But it needs both concepts there.
Yeah.
It needs to deploy capital. It needs to get each one of us more knowledgeable and conscient about our behavior. And I believe the ethics of the 21st century need to adopt sustainability as a mantra, as the one most important guideline, because what we have seen in the last 5 decades is a constant deterioration of nature and emissions rising because we haven't created the collective and individual conscience that we need to stop the climate crisis that we face, that is creating and triggering more massive displacement and migration like no other time before in the planet.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Your wife, Maria Juliana, and you have launched the foundation Innovación para el Desarrollo, Innovation for Development, where you have a part of education with dreamers and makers, helping youth from difficult areas, and also a conference. And last year's conference was AI, artificial intelligence, angel or devil. And part of the conversations we have had this week here in Cornell is this conversation about how AI is changing and is going to change the nature of universities, both in the US and also in the global South. So universities were temples of knowledge. The knowledge now has moved online, and AI, language models, own knowledge. So how do you see changing AI, changing education, universities, and also for both, for developed world, for the US, and also for the global South?
Lourdes, for some countries, new technologies is AI. For other countries, AI can be III, which means it can create a lot of trouble and social conflict just because we're not moving fast and we are not understanding what the impact will be. Most of the experts have expressed that in the course of the next year, the massive transformation of AI technologies is going to be so disruptive that many jobs are going to be lost in professions like marketing, insurance analysm, analysis for law firms, or basic research. All those jobs might be lost next year. So it means that we have to reinvent. It means that we have to adapt. But the big question is the global South adopting? And for now, we tend to believe that that revolution is far away from us, but it's going to knock on our doors pretty soon. And if we're not prepared with the sound regulation, it's going to disrupt the labor market. And it's going to disrupt the specific industries. And in order for us to access to that technology, it's going to be more costly. So I think we have to react now, have the ethical frameworks. I feel proud that when I was president of Colombia, we launched the first AI ethical framework in the Western Hemisphere. Because we cannot see this technology as something that we have to blockade, stop, and hyper-regulate. But we have to see this as something that requires from us to modernize the labor market rules that allow technologies to be used in a positive way. It also has to do with the protection of intellectual property and many other things. So in order for AI to be part of the development transformation and not an III where we're taking the hit and we're taking all the disadvantages of losing momentum, That's something that requires a statesman and different organizations, including local governments and cities and the private sector, to identify which are the best opportunities that AI will bring to our countries. And that's why I'm optimistic. But again, as I have been saying, if you have a screwdriver, it can be a tool or it can be a weapon. And who determines that is the moral stand of those who are having it in their hands. The same thing happens with AI. We can make AI something transformative, instrumental, fundamental for the benefit of society, or it can also become a weapon if it's not used by the sound, moral, and ethical guidelines. And that's why we need to establish some set of regulations that allow citizens to be protected from those who would want or will be tempted to use AI in a weaponized way to harm society. So that's how I see it.
President Duque, as a former head of state, what do you see as the role of leaders like yourself in advancing global climate cooperation? And another way of asking this might be, what's next for you in advancing these ideas that we've been talking about between these books?
Well, Patrick, I enjoy the things that I do right now. As you know, we have the Innovation for Development Foundation. We created the Ivan Duque Center for Liberty and Prosperity. I am part of multiple boards in which I also serve as the chairman of the Concordia Amazon Initiative. I am part of the board of SBTI, part of the board of CI. I've been a fellow at the World Resources Institute and the Bezos Earth Fund. So I continue to be very involved. And now I'm doing also a leadership of the Global Biodiversity Alliance with President Ali from Guyana, because we need to work with the UN system, but we also need to look beyond the UN system. And the fact that we can create coalitions of business players, academia, heads of state, people who come from different sectors of society in order to accelerate conservation, protection of biodiversity. Well, that is also helpful in the cause that we have embraced to minimize or reduce the negative effects of climate change. Because if we have lost, in the case of the Amazon, the size of Germany and France together in the last 5 decades due to deforestation, we need to act in order to stop and to prevent and avoid those practices. But we need to create a sustainable way of living for those communities who will be paid for ecosystemical services. And that liquidity should come from bonds, should come from credits, should come from guarantees, should come from swaps, but it also can come from offsets from the global north in order to support the projects in the global south. So I think now that what we're all expecting, and this is part of the role that I want to continue having, is to create that kind of awareness in which we know that whatever goes wrong in the global north will have a negative impact in the global south, but whatever goes right, and if we're able to use a soft offset mechanism, we might be able to bring a lot of liquidity from the global north for those projects in the global south that if it didn't have those resources, they would not exist. And more importantly, we need, in order to reach the NDCs by 2030, Africa needs to invest the equivalent of $2.8 trillion in order to reach their NDCs by 2030. I think Latin America will be in a similar condition. So are those resources going to come from the budgets? No, there's a lot of budgetary constraint. Are they going to come from philanthropy? Philanthropy still have a lot of concerns and constraints. So we need to create market-driven, nature-based solutions, and I think that's the best way in which I am contributing right now. Identifying them, promoting the green taxonomies, having very clear data in order to define KPIs and monitor its execution, but we definitely need to help in having a faster and scalable capital for the global south to do much better. So I'm enjoying that role, and I want more organizations to follow what we're doing. And if we connect biodiversity, fighting land degradation, and being able to create a carbon neutral pathway for the next decade, well, I think all of that should benefit society.
Thank you.
We have now questions from the audience, and one that relates very well to what you have just said. President Duque, Colombia holds a significant part of the Amazon rainforest. So Mehdi is asking, what measures are being taken to protect it from deforestation and illegal mining? And how is Colombia working with neighboring Amazon countries? Because the Amazon is in most of the South American countries. So how is Colombia working with neighboring Amazon countries to create a coordinated climate and conservation strategy?
Okay, on the first one, I will connect both, Lourdes. So Colombia has 35 of its territory in Amazonic land, 50% of its territory in tropical forest, almost 56% of the world high altitude ecosystems, better known as páramos. So we have those natural assets. Now, how can we work in order to protect? And how can we work in order to mobilize resources? So I would say four things have occurred in Colombia in at least during our administration and maybe some of the previous ones. One is that we created for the first time a green taxonomy. So we looked at all the indicators that we could have in order to reach what we wanted to reach in terms of environmental success. And we launched it at the New York Stock Exchange, and that opened the floor for us to create green bonds in which we had a 7% greenium, so allowed us to get resources for the government while at the same time following specific indicators to be met associated with our environmental goals. Second has to do with the creation of a carbon market. So Colombia is now the second most dynamic market, maybe after Brazil in Latin America, and growing. Third, how do we create the debt swaps for local governments or even for corporations that are doing much more or doing much better on their environmental stance? How can we also trigger the idea of using compensation and creating the payment for ecosystemical services of communities? So in the rural areas, they're also involved and participating in conservation and not tempted by illegal mining or other illegal activities that harm the environment. So I believe that our role now and the role that we have to embrace is let's try to see how we can mobilize the fastest amount of capital in order to protect the Amazon, because we have lost in the last 5 decades the equivalent of France and Germany in territory. And I would invite and encourage most of the countries in the Amazon basin to support the concept that was established in the Leticia Pact in 2019, and also be able to invite most of the Latin American countries to commit and fulfill the idea of 30% protected areas before 2030. And if all this happens, and we look at the coordination that was established with the Leticia Pact for the Amazon, just the Leticia Pact, if it's well accelerated in its objectives, I think it will be very important for Brazil, it will be very important for Colombia, and it will also be very important for the rest of the Amazonic basin.
Excellent.
Okay, we are coming to the close. So what do you think should be next? What do you think is next priorities for you and somehow for the world? You continue to be very active in public service, being as public servant to society, not only Colombia, but Latin America and the world. So what do you think should be next? What are the next actions? And I would like...
Lourdes, thank you so much. I think the most important thing that we can all do is to understand that nature, biodiversity, is an asset that is part of our richness, and that's why I'm working hard within the Global Biodiversity Alliance to create a gross biodiversity product calculation that could allow those mega diverse countries to understand how big is their natural asset base, how much they have to protect it, and how it should be accounted when it comes to determine the economic importance of what is generated or what is included in a country, in a territory. The second has to do with incentivizing global north carbon credit mechanisms to allow the massive mobilization of capital for the global south. If the global north is allowed to offset, and that doesn't mean to leave aside their daily endeavor to reduce emissions. They have to reduce emissions, but they also need to use offsets as a way to mobilize capital for the rest of the planet, well, I think that will be substantially important, because if that doesn't occur, the global south is not going to meet their NDCs. And what is going to happen is that we're going to be more tempted in the global south to see populists trying to diminish or just to deny the importance of climate action policies. And that's too dangerous, because if that occurs, we will certainly see a spike on emissions that will have a negative impact in the environment. So those elements for me are very important. And I would say try to sometimes make a language pedagogy. In some countries, because of ideological preconceptions, the term climate change, the term conservation creates a divided environment. Well, I think we just look also at carbon efficiency. And we understand that carbon efficiency is part of the competitiveness of a country. And when you look at the competitiveness of a country and you see countries that have a lower amount of emissions per point of GDP, well, that should make them more attractive for investors. So I think we have to make also the narrative shifts in order to be strategical and impactful on the pedagogy that would allow the private and the public sector to work in a joint way to create carbon neutral sentiments and opportunities, but at the same time, nature positive results.
Thank you very much. Maybe you can say just a few words about what we discussed yesterday and this morning about a possible book that you would like to launch, highlighting the Atkinson work on sustainability and also the technology that we have here at Cornell.
Well, Lourdes, I think that it's a big honor for me to be in Cornell. It's a great honor for me to interact with all the community at the Atkinson Center and also with the Emerging Markets Institute. So one of the things that I'm planning for the future is to, based on the experience that we had with Fuerza y Verdad, that we worked in Oxford with professors from different fields, is also concentrate here in Cornell in those technologies that are being crafted, that are revolutionizing sectors that are created from here, to share with the rest of the planet and talk with those scientists, with those academics, but also with those leaders who want to contribute and do good and do well at the same time, and be able to show the whole world that technology and sustainability, which is technology applied to sustainability, it's something that pays back, that is important, and that can substantially transform our societies. And the fact that we have professors in Cornell from many global South countries doing this work, well, I think that's very inspiring. And the fact that when I see all these processes of research transforming and improving society, it all comes to the essential phase: who are we, in which we want to be useful for society. So I want to be able to talk with those persons that are useful for society with the technologies they're creating, and to make that a pedagogical case so that people can learn, analyze, reflect, and be able also to produce an impact on their own.
Thank you very much, former President Ivan Duque. In these years that we have been interacting, I am grateful for your generosity in wanting to share your tremendous knowledge and experience as a global leader, and also the humility. You come to the university with the idea to learn and to share and to learn and continue the virtuous circle of learning, and very grateful for that. Also, you have made something that is always very difficult in universities, that is collaboration across campuses. We all have our own silos, and this time we worked very closely, and we are very grateful for the partnership with the Cornell Atkinson Center and the Emerging Markets Institute. We'll have the video uploaded online, so for those who were unable to attend live, and definitely very grateful also to the eCornell team, Marcos, Shane, Chris, grateful to work with you, and also the Atkinson Center team, and also the team at EMI. Thank you very much. Looking forward to continue interacting with you and with the audience in sustainability emerging markets, global south, and global challenges moving forward for the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.